Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal's Polyglot Software Development Podcast. Our guest today is Xan Hong. San, thanks for taking the time to come back on the podcast. We had a chat yesterday. Before I hand it over to you, I'm just going to give a quick intro. San runs a no-code development agency where he has helped clients save over $1 million in development costs. He was one of the first certified Bubble developers ever. San's also a mentor at the Founders Institute Accelerator Program in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hey, San, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, welcome. Thank you for having me, I should say.
Yep, no worries. And before we get into the podcast, we're just going to dig deeper into Bubble. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. We'll just spend like the next hour being more hands-on about it. But before we jump right in, if you could just give a brief introduction about you and your company, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we are a no-code development agency. Most of our work to date has been in Bubble. We are starting to do more with another tech stack, which is WeWeb front end and a Xano back end. But as Krish mentioned, based on what our clients have told us, we've saved our clients over $1 million in app development costs. So using no codes. It's a passion of mine, and I'm happy to be here and see if I can educate those that.
Super. Thank you. So, just by way of quick context, for anybody watching or listening to this, we had a chat. I had a chat with San yesterday. It was very interesting about the basics, the no code, low code, comparing that to AI based code generation and whatnot. So definitely check out that podcast before you. I mean, you don't have to have seen that before this, but I recommend you do that so you get good context. In this one, you're just going to get deeper and sort of spend the next hour primarily me learning Bubble from San, going through the user interface and whatnot. And hopefully, for anyone else out there who's looking to do this, it should provide value too. Okay, so without further ado, let me share my screen. Tell me if you see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So, yesterday, let me go back here to the home page. I know we created some. Yeah, I mean, I just created something for like 2 seconds. I'm wondering whether we can just delete that and start clean sand. Does that make
Yeah, that
sense?
would be fine. That would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just, okay, that's gone. Awesome. So before we create an app, what do you think? I mean, I'm open either way. Should we just go through the basics of their platform, learn their basic user interface before we create an app?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, we could definitely do that.
Okay. So I'm just going to sort of follow through here, follow along. Tell me what are the initial starting points here?
So I would go in and you can click create an app. You can name it whatever.
Okay, let's call it podcast. Okay.
Go ahead and just activate the. Start with the basic features. I don't want you to have to remember to get.
Okay,
Yeah,
no worries.
I can't remember if you have to put the credit card or not, but
Okay.
we don't need anything basic. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to go ahead and have you skip the assistant for
Okay.
today because I think it's we can go through the basics. Do you want me to, I went through it a little bit yesterday. You want me to just kind of go through the main tabs on the left hand side?
Yeah, because yesterday we talked about many different things. The idea is we can keep this one very focused. So even if it's a tiny bit repetitive, I think it's all right.
Okay, that's fine. So the first tab, so most of your activity is going to happen on that left hand side with those 1, 2, 3, 4, with 7 icons on the left hand side. That you're going to be switching back and forth. So that top tab is going to be your design tab. So this is where you're going to be doing the visual elements and kind of what you see, what you get type design of the app itself.
You know what, Sam? What we can do is, if that makes sense, I've not used this before at all, right? So to just follow, if this makes sense, or we could choose a different format. Now that you mentioned, I'm just thinking about it. Should we just add a couple of buttons into the workflow that lets you add a to-do item, for instance? You know what I mean? Just like a basic.
Yeah, we could do that. And then we could display it. We can use what we call a repeating group to display that information. Yeah, we could absolutely do that.
Okay, perfect. So let's set. So the idea here, at least from the requirement standpoint, is you know what? I just want to be able to create some to-dos, maybe edit them, delete them, however far we can go in the next 1 hour. The first step is just, trivializing the problem. I just want to create a to-do item. So a place to a text box to type the to-do, and then maybe click submit so it gets added essentially.
Sure. So okay, so the best thing to do we care how pretty it looks or no?
No, not at all. Completely not. Right? Just functional. Yep.
Okay,
Which I
okay.
think is which I think is a good point you raise, because I want to call out for this as well as we go along. If again, for people who are starting coming into the workforce, or have done this for a while, or switch careers, doesn't matter. Hopefully some of this not so much advice, but our experience coming from the two of us who've done this a bit might hopefully be helpful. I think when we get started, I've actually seen some people, out of college and whatnot, it's not everybody obviously, get bogged down by the finer details. And I always say, you know what, just let's get something working, the most difficult thing working, right?
Just want to make sure before we get started. Make
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, no, no, no. Yeah, I just want to
Okay,
call
yeah.
it for that. Say, you know what? Let's get that basic stuff. Beautifying it is a subsequent problem, right? Let's just get to it if we can at a later point. I'm just telling to the people, not so much to you, but just to folks watching this. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So let's just create a quick and
Yeah.
dirty version.
Yeah, so it's interesting because there's multiple ways to do this, and actually, I think what would be interesting is to actually show you two different ways to do the same thing, right? So,
Okay.
I think the first way is I'm going to have you put the visual elements on the screen. So, I think what you're going to need is you're going to need a once you can put a button because since it's right there if you want, so you can grab a button, just drag it. So you see the button element, yeah. So just go ahead and drag that,
I'm
and
just going to
then
say, I'm going to
yeah, and
edit
the
this and
label will say
say,
submit or whatever,
okay,
whatever you want to add it. Yeah, that's fine.
yeah,
And then if you
okay,
scroll down, you're going to want an input on the left hand side.
okay, I close this. So now we have a button here. I'm just
Yep,
going to
you can close
close this
that
design
the properties field. So if you scroll down, the
here,
inputs.
the
Yeah,
input.
there you go. Yep,
Yep.
you could drag that over, and then you could put. Yeah.
So the question for you, Sen, does Bubble support like a native interface, like a native app that you could download to your Mac or something, or is it something that has to be done? The design time has to
So
be done
that's
on the
a
browser.
great question, and it's your question is incredibly timely, and I'll tell you why. So Bubble started as primarily a web-based app development tool. Now there are a lot of the thing that's really nice about Bubble is they're very robust third party, very loyal third party plugin and kind of synergistic tools that have been created as part of the Bubble ecosystem, right? So up until very recently, you could absolutely do a native app, and we have several that are published on the store. What you would do though is you would build a mobile first web app, right?
Okay.
There's a plugin that you could download. There's a couple plugins that we've used in the past that you can use. You build it, and then you can have access to things like, location based features, push notifications as well. You build that functionality in, and then there's a third party wrapping service that would wrap it in a coded wrapper that you could then submit to the App Store, right? So that was
Okay.
prior to very recently. At
Okay.
BubbleCon, which was just a couple months ago, they launched their beta very recently, and we actually have access to it. It's actually very cool. We're one of the first agencies to get access to it. They're completely native builder, and what is unique about that is number one is I'm not gonna get into too much nitty gritty, but I think the two things that are relevant here are it actually outputs it out as React Native code, right?
Okay.
And then prior to this builder, you had to have internet access for it to work. But with this new builder, from what I understood, I don't think they're rolling it out in kind of stages. But eventually, you would be able to operate that particular app offline, which is a game changer for us.
Okay. So essentially, in the future, the most likely is going to be a native, so you can download that, build it locally at design time, essentially, and once you're ready to publish it, you're publishing it, right? So you don't necessarily have to work off of the web interface.
Well, yeah, and just to be clear, if you submit it through an app, the app wrapper, you can download that app as well. It's basically a web view with an app wrapper. And
Okay.
so again, if you don't have internet access, you don't have access to the app, right? So
Okay. Cool.
versus with this new builder, it's actually outputting React Native code, and so the difference is now you can use it offline. So does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. Okay. Cool. So let me go back to sharing this.
And like your question is like extremely timely because like I said, that literally just launched like
Okay.
couple months
Perfect.
ago.
Because
Yeah.
makes sense. Yep. Because sometimes working off of these, one of the challenges that I've seen personally is when you're doing design time work on a web interface, it kind of works, but it's not as seamless or as graceful necessarily as when you have like a native app, for instance, right? So that's kind of why I was asking the question. Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
perfect.
I'll be honest. I mean, the ones that we've put out with the wrapping service have not been bad. I mean, the experience is, I don't think you would know that it is kind of a web view type of app. But
Okay.
I definitely think it's a huge improvement, though. With the new builder by far, because
Yep.
there's going to be some new
Cool.
features that they couldn't do before. So like swiping actions and things like that, that wasn't really accessible, prior. But now they're, that kind of functionality is going to be accessible, which I think,
Okay.
yeah,
Got it. Awesome. So
okay,
back here, okay, we added a, again, we don't want to try and make it look, we're just going to quick
yeah,
and
that's
dirty,
fine.
get that working, right? So we have an input box here. So I was going to click text at the top, but that's a label, right? That's so
Yeah,
much.
that
So
is
now,
static text. Well, let me take that back. It can be dynamic text, but that you're correct. It's more of a label text. That's correct.
so I'm going to actually say, so the other thing I'm noticing is when you click here, you have this pane where you make the change. You're not making the changes into the box here, right? You're actually making the changes onto a pane on the right side. I'm just calling out for these things. Some of it is obvious, sent to you. I just so when people are following along, it hopefully it resonates. Yeah. Okay.
The reason why is you can add dynamic elements into that text field. And so that little blue box, we don't have anything right now, but that little blue box gives you access to potentially access either data fields or what Bubble calls custom states, or if you're using a third party API, you can actually access some of API data through that as well. So there's a lot of dynamic text that you can
You
add.
know what, Sam? Maybe I picked the wrong element. I was just looking for a label, like a heading sort of, but this maybe is not
No,
the
you
right
can use
element.
that. If you click on that box, you can actually you can type in what you want. Why is
So
that?
I'm here. I said add to do, but I was expecting it to show up. I want like a label, not so
Yeah,
much.
so click on that, and
Oh, what
then
this looks like a password protected type of field here, right?
so you know what? I wonder if you have it set as a password.
Oh, let me delete it. I picked the defaults here. Let me just go ahead and delete it and let's add it back.
Yeah,
Okay,
there is
I
a
went here.
password field, but that's usually for an input box. I'm actually
Okay,
sorry,
so I went here.
it's
It says
small.
edit me. I just said add to do, right? That's all I wanted there.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay,
I'm not
now
sure what
it's,
happened the first time.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And now what I want to do is just give it a background color. So what I did here, I made it heading one. That's when,
Oh,
yeah,
because you
that's
have
a
to
bit,
make it bigger. You probably have to make that bigger. That might have just put. I wonder if yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
okay. Okay, let's see. And let's see, I want to add a background color here.
Yep. So there's a background
Background
option.
style.
Yep. There you go. Solid
Hey,
color. Or yeah, you could do that.
actually, you know what? I pick a solid flat color and then I'm going to pick a color here, maybe a blue, something like this. Okay. And then maybe I know we don't want to make it pretty, but I'm just trying to play with some of these
Yeah.
just
No. No.
just to get
Absolutely.
folks
Fine.
acquainted with it. Yeah.
You're
I want to
driving,
change.
Chris. Whatever. It's your show. Your world.
Yep.
We're in your world right now.
So I want to change the text color here. So I'm going to go to the text color. I want to make it. Oh, it's just okay. That's good. So now we have add. Actually, you know what? It shouldn't be add. I'm just going to make it to do. It's good enough. Okay. So far we have a heading, right? And then we have an area to type the. Is there a way to, when I'm operating on a particular element, right, San? So let's say in this case, my intention is to just make it wider. Like, this pane, I don't want for it to come in the way because I'm not trying to make any changes to what the pane offers. I'm trying to make changes to what I can directly act upon the element itself. Is there a way, or is the pane always going to show up when you're actually active on an element?
I'm trying to think if there's an option to hide that. It might be in the settings. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm used to it, so I just move it out of the way.
Oh, you move it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm used to it. So actually, I'm not 100% sure. But like I said, it's something that I use all the time. So it actually doesn't bother me. But there might be a way.
Yeah.
Didn't have
That's
that.
fine. The reason I'm asking is I'm just going to, as we learn through this, I'm just going to share, continuation of our yesterday's conversation, right? Just
Yeah.
sharing my thoughts as somebody who's not done plenty of like
Sure.
no
Yep.
code
Yep.
work, sort of sharing the feedback that way. When somebody's watching, they know, yeah, this works. I like this, or I don't like that part of it, or
Yep.
whatnot,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this one does bother me a bit that it actually comes in the way. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So I want to extend this. I think it's wide enough. Maybe that's good enough. Yep. So let me make this. I think that's fine. Now I just want to say, what else do we do here? We have a heading. We have an area to type this. And let's say I want to limit this to like say 120 characters, right? I want to add a rule here saying you cannot type more than 120 characters.
Yeah. So you just passed that. Did you see the setting if you scroll up?
Or limit the number of
Yeah. Yep.
characters.
And
Yeah, max.
I'll just also point out, right? You see, it's a little blurry on my screen, so I think there's a format drop down right above that. So
Yeah,
you could have it also kind of formatted in a certain way. I think obviously you want text here, but I just wanted to point that out as well.
got it. Okay, perfect. You could choose email, password, all of these
Yep.
different
Yeah.
data
So it's
types
going
and
to
whatnot.
validate the value automatically.
Okay, got it. So we have text and there's a number of different options here. So the question that I have here as well. So let's say this is a configuration. There's every element has a pane that pops up and there's tabs and there's configuration, right? So is there a non-UI representation of this? In other words, let's say I wanted to do this and I'm going to do it repetitively, right? I'm going to add a bunch of text boxes. I'm going to have some basic configuration. In other words, let's say a design system of some sort. In other words,
Yes.
if at Snowpal, all of our buttons are going to look a certain way and have certain
Yes.
rules. Is there a way to do that?
Yes. So there's two things you can do. So number one is there are if you scroll down to the bottom.
Actually, you know what, Sam? My bad. Sometimes I jump ahead of me and please call out and I do that. You know what? I want to keep the focus on getting this working and then I'll ask you all my curiosity
Okay. Okay. No,
questions.
no problem. No problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah,
Okay.
the answer is yes. There's multiple ways to do that, and we can walk through a couple different ways. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then there's a placeholder here. I'm just going to say add to do item. And then I think that's good. And then this is a button, right? Okay. I think we're making progress here. What do we do next?
So let's do a workflow to create the new to do. Let's do that first. So if you click on the add button and then add a workflow, yep. And so then the first thing is you're going to click there, and yeah. So then you're going to click here to add that. So you're going to do So under data things, you're going to do create a new thing, and then so new type you can. So this is where I'm going to show two different ways to do the same thing. So in this case, we're going to create the data type right as we're doing it. So then from
Okay.
here, you're going to call it to do or whatever
Sorry.
you want to call it. Doesn't.
So the type name, what is it? Is it if I thought like a relation database or no, it doesn't matter, SQL or no SQL. What am I? Are we talking about the name of a column here or a field?
No, it's the name of a table, I guess is maybe the best way to
Okay. So
describe
I'm going
that.
to call it to do is plural, right?
Okay,
Okay.
yep. And then you can add fields from there. So if you click on that, you can do whatever you want to name that. So the actual description or whatever you want to call that.
No, no, sorry. What is this that we're doing right now? We are creating a workflow that says when a button
Now
is
we're adding
clicked.
the name of the column. Now we're adding the name of the column. Yep.
Okay. I'm just going to say description or something, right? So
Yep.
should I be clicking a new field here,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Create a new field.
Okay. Description field type is going to be text.
Yep.
This
Create.
field is a list, multiple entries. No, right? I
So
mean,
this will not be. Yeah. This would not be. Yeah. The way we're
right?
going to do it, this would not be a list.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
just going to create it.
And
Okay. And
then
then,
to the right of that, don't go anywhere yet. So where it says after description equals, you want to hit where it says click. And then, sorry, I can't fully read it, make everything out, but there should be input box or something.
oh yeah, it says elements, button input add to
Yeah,
do
so
item.
so you're gonna pick that one. So basically, that's the input box where you're gonna enter the description of the to do. So you're gonna click on that. So
Okay,
input.
so basically that the language is input add to do item. So I presume that the add to do is what I said. So input placeholder item is what it reads, right? So it's input add to do item because I guess our name that I'd given probably was add to do or something like that. Okay.
And then you're going to click value of that. So let's yeah. And so what you're saying is when I click that button, I'm going to create a new to do list, and the fields that we're going to update are description, and we're going to pull the value from that input box that you created. Does that make sense?
Okay. I'm going to do it and then probably I'll digest what you just said there, right? So what we're doing there is we said in description, like what other options could we have picked? Maybe let me go there. So it says description equals current user, or if it's the current logged in user, do a search for, let's just do because there's a couple of things here. It says text to do and input add to do item. Like what would be the difference between those types of things?
Well, so what you have there's a list of elements, right, that you have on that page that you created, right? And
Right?
so there's going to be buttons, you have text elements on there. In your case, there's only one element that's really an input element, but theoretically, you could have a drop down element on there. You could have multiple elements on there.
Okay, different
You're
types
you're
of things.
telling
Okay.
you're telling the workflow where you're getting the value for the new data
From okay.
that you're creating. Does that make
And
sense?
then the apostrophe value is valid, isn't valid, values is you're just saying I'm going to let the user type something here.
Yeah. So, and this is where I was saying that bubble does bubble things in a bubble way, right? And I think that's where some developers get a little frustrated with it. Some of those things make more sense in a conditional statement. This isn't really a conditional statement here, so it's not. It's
Oh, okay. I think I see what he's saying. Okay, so let me pick
so,
this.
so some of these things really aren't valid for what we're doing in this particular instance. So, like, if you go back down where it says only when, you see that thing at the bottom.
Oh no,
Get
the
into that.
previous one.
Yeah. No,
You're
no,
talking
no,
about
no. At the bottom of that property screen.
it says create new custom
No,
state.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Click on value again. So, yep. Click on that. Yep.
No, it's already. Oh, sorry. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, after that. Okay, okay.
Well, no, no. So click outside of that window for a second.
Like somewhere here.
No, in that dark gray area.
Oh, this one here.
Yeah.
Okay,
So then, if you go down to the bottom of that screen where it says only when, nope, right above that.
here.
That's where you can do a conditional statement of when you want that action to happen, right?
Okay, so
And so
Sam,
that's
let me
yeah,
do the basic here. I
yeah,
want to do
okay,
the basic. Okay, so we said we'll come back to this in a second. A description equals. So should I just close this pane?
yeah. You can close that pane. Yep.
So what have we done on this pane right now? We have just, if you could tell me, like from a development standpoint, we already had a button. Here we are saying when the button is clicked, right? And when the button is clicked, where did we only when where did we tell Bubble that you need to do something when the button is clicked? Did we do it outside this pane or in this pane?
No, that's already buttons because if you look above where it says when button is clicked, right,
Right?
that's already when you went into the button and you clicked on add workflow, Bubble automatically created that condition.
So if I wanted it to be double click, I would just add a different event and delete the other one.
So that's a good question. There's standard wise, that might be done with the plugin, but there's no kind of double quick click option for the button. It's only
Or sorry, what I meant was a right click. If I want a right click, not just a regular click, but a right click action.
right click might also require a plugin as well. So that's not one of their standard. Yeah, that's actually not one of their
Okay,
standard. Yeah.
got it, right? So now we're adding that there's already there. And then we said once a button is clicked, we are saying what you're supposed to do, create a collection or a database, or a table, depending on what type of database you're working on. To-dos is more like a table or a document or a collection, sorry, in NoSQL language. And description is a field and slash an attribute,
Correct.
right? And then we said, the only thing I'm trying to think is, why did it need the, oh, it needs it for other reasons. We'll come back to it in a second. I was just thinking all that would have needed is for me to tell where to store what the attributes are, but it actually needed something more, probably because there are a lot of variations to what can possibly happen here. And then when we said only when clicked, what does that mean? Is it saying
No,
that do
no, no, no,
not?
no. So you don't have to fill that out, right? Like you've already defined when this happens. However, you could, and this is where you said you want to stay simple. So I was actually not going to touch this again. But you could say if there was another element on this screen, you could say only do this when this element has this value. You could
Okay. There's a state. Okay, some
yeah.
notion of a
So it's kind of
state
more of an
there.
if then type of statement. So you can kind of create those, but in this case, trying to keep it simple, you don't have to put anything there. In this case,
Perfect.
it'll always happen when you click.
Okay, so I have step one. What do we do next?
So what you might want to do is I'm trying to think if you need a. Give me 1 second. I just gotta make sure I'm in one of my own apps because I can't always see what's happening here. Custom events. So
Actually,
you
that
may
brings
have
up a
to use.
question, San. Is
Yeah.
there a way I can share this with a fellow developer, like such as yourself, so we can collaboratively do sort of pair programming on what we're
Yes.
doing here?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You could. You could actually add me as well to it.
Do you want me to do that now?
Yeah. You could. You could. You could. Yep. Absolutely. So if you go into the
Come.
settings tab, which is the gear icon
Okay, so I think it's
on
over
the
here
left
on
hand
the left
side. Yep.
side.
Right
Yeah.
there. And then go
So
into
collaboration.
collaboration. And then
Okay.
if you go to add collaborators, let me drop this in the chat for you. Is there a chat?
I'm just sending it to your email account, right?
No. Change the SAN to info.
Okay. Like this?
Yep.
And then invite, right?
Yeah. Click
Okay.
invite. Yep. All right. So I should get access to that. Give me a second here. Let me just okay. All right. Let me just okay. Podcast. I can see it. And then you should start to see I don't know if you can see it yet, but
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right? So you're
yep.
there. Perfect. This way, you can drive
Yeah,
as
it's a
well.
little bit easier for me to see. I couldn't see everything quick. Okay, so then let's go into the workflow. So one thing we could do is, you
But
want
Sam, here's what I want to do, right? Right
yeah.
now, we did something. We created a label, a button,
Mhm.
did at least a little bit. I want to just sort of test this out, right? Before I go any further, but maybe do you think, typically that's what I would want to do, but that will bring us to a different set of, actions. I'm pretty sure. So maybe now that I think about it, maybe we'll finish this and go. Otherwise, I would want to
Well,
iteratively figure
why don't
out,
we do
right?
one more thing because it'll be a little bit easier for you to test it where you
Perfect.
can actually see.
Okay.
Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to go back to the design tab. Oh no, you're on the design tab, and then I want you to go down to repeating.
Is this somewhere here?
Yep. So under containers, so it's gonna be scroll up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
repeating
Repeat.
group. I see it here.
Drag that over and draw one. Yep. There you go. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So then under type of content, you're gonna want to pick what do you, to dos.
Okay.
Okay. And then under data source, you're gonna click on the click button and you're gonna do search for, and then
To do.
you're gonna pick to dos, and then you could sort it, but you don't have to. Well, you could sort it by description, and then descending, you could do no there.
Okay.
So that's technically going to sort it alphabetically, right? And then hit close, right? So now you've kind of attached that data type to that type of container, right?
Okay.
But let's do something else so that the when you
But Sam,
test it,
let's step back, right? What are we doing now that we created those buttons? So what are we trying to accomplish? Are we saying that it's not just one to do item, but I want any number of to do items to be available after I click add on one of them? Is that what we're doing here?
so that repeating group is a way to display a list of data. Does that make
Okay.
sense? And you've assigned the to do data type to that element. Does that make sense?
Okay. Okay.
And
I think
then
I get. In other words, the reason we're doing this action is because we need to be able to add more than one to do item, right? It's like a group.
correct. And honestly, I want to be able to test it so we can actually see if it's working or not. And right
Okay.
now, there's no way for us to know if anything's been added. So I wanted to show an element that shows that stuff is being added.
Okay.
Does that make
Perfect.
sense?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So then the last thing we need to do is you are going to
Should I
close
close
that.
this?
Yeah, you can close that screen. Now go take a text element.
And then this, do I need to, I guess I need to make it as wide as the one above, right? Because I want it to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
the
yeah,
same.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
you could do that. Yep. So what you want to do is, so close that. Now go back up to the text element. So the same one. No, I'm sorry, on the left-hand side.
Here?
Yep. And you want to drag that text element into the first container of the repeating group. Yep.
Okay.
And then if we go into the settings, click that. Nope, 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 nope.
No?
So close that. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to, I'm sorry, what happened to the
Did I
text?
drop it or?
Okay, there it is. There it is. Okay, so now click on that blue thing where it says insert dynamic. And then you're going to say current, hold on one second, current cells to do. And then you're going to click on description. So I'll just walk through what we're doing here.
Okay.
So we created this repeating group, which is an element to display a list of things, right? If you remember, we assigned a data source and we said we're going to search for all the to-dos available, right? This is probably simplistic. Eventually, you would probably want to make define that a little bit better. But right now, we're going to say let's display all the to-dos that are out there. And now
Okay.
you've put a text element to actually show the text. You're going to say, I want to show the description for that cell's to-do item. Does that make sense?
Okay. It does. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
I think
So
I'll have
now,
more questions for you once we get it running and then come back and
yeah,
try to
sure, sure,
break
sure,
it
sure.
intentionally. Yep.
So we should, hopefully, knock on wood, we should be able to test this now. So if you go into the right-hand corner and click preview.
Okay, before I go there, let's say I did something wrong here, right? Or is it possible for me to do something wrong because all that we have done is picked from options that Bubbles provided? Would there be like sort of an error window that says,
Yes,
no, Krish, you
yes.
did something wrong?
So see where above at the top window it says 0 issues?
This one here, okay.
It would automatically pick up, like if it happens all the time. Trust me.
Okay.
It's actually very annoying. But yeah, no, it would pick up if you structured something in a way that's incorrect. Like
Okay, got it.
yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
So now I should go to preview.
Yeah, if you click on preview.
Normal. Oops. You know what? Let me actually share my entire screen because what it's going to do is it does open multiple windows. So let me
Oh, gotcha.
tell me if you see the window, right?
There you go. Yep.
Okay.
So now you should be able to type something in that input box and hopefully keep
Oh, okay. So we are actually previewing. This is the runtime preview mode, so to speak, right? Okay. It's going to say, and
so that
this is
it showed
okay.
up. So what we probably need to do, I can show you what to do after that. Yeah. There's one step we could have added to that workflow.
Okay.
Which is
So I'll
clear.
leave that open. I'll go back here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we go back into the workflow on the left-hand side,
On the left-hand side. Okay. Go to workflow.
and then add a step after where we create, and then reset input, reset relevant inputs, I think is what it's called.
Yep.
And then now what that's going to do is after you hit that button, it's going to clear that input box.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. So I'll close this, right?
Yep.
And now I would just refresh this. Okay, cool. So, and now let's say a couple of things, right? Let's say I want to make this narrow. I don't want this to be like too tall, just visually.
Yep.
I want to go and modify these. So
Yep.
I go back here. I go to
Go back into
design.
design element. Yep. So click on that, and it's
Oh, it's 4 rows, right? Just make it 1 row.
yeah. What you
Oh,
probably
no.
want to do is uncheck set fixed number of rows. You probably want to uncheck that.
Okay.
And then now you can go in and you can change the minimum height of that row.
So minimum height. I see what you mean. Let's say I want to make it. Now I go back here. Fresh. I guess that fixed the top too. What about the last one? Is there a difference?
So here, if you go back into that, now go into the layout tab. See in the middle, you've got appearance and then you got layout.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, here.
Layout. Yeah. So probably what's happening is, you've got a fixed size to that container. So that's probably why you're seeing that. So you're getting into the responsiveness of it, which honestly.
Oh, okay. No worries. Those are minor things. Okay. So let's see. Okay. What we're doing here is there's 3 things we've done so far. In terms of, we added 3 of them. So I'm going to say session 3. I'm sorry, session 3. Okay, now we have this. This is the preview mode. And now if I have to, let's say this is fine. And then if I want to do one more thing, actually, what before we do that one more thing, how do I deploy this? I need to upgrade to deploy.
Yeah, you would have to upgrade to deploy. You could connect a custom domain to it, and then you need a paid plan to deploy it to a custom domain.
Okay, we could do
The
that.
free
Let's see
plan, you
how.
could use it on a bubble domain. So I mean, you could use it as is if you don't care about the bubble domain that you're seeing.
Okay, and then this the preview, it's it's only available to me, right? I mean, if I pull this into an
No, that's
incognito
actually not correct.
window,
You could share that link. You could actually share that link.
so that this link is actually public. Okay,
Yeah, it
got
is.
it.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
So which means you're sort of working on it. You figure out, you're like, hey, here's kind of what I'm thinking about. What do you want for me to do, right? Even to have this initial, like you mentioned it yesterday, right? Getting this initial feedback on
Yeah.
is this sort of
Now,
what we're trying to achieve, for instance.
I will mention one thing though. If you look at the domain name, it says I can't see it, but it should say
Yeah,
version dash test. You see that?
correct. Yeah.
So we're in the development environment. So if you deploy it, there is a live environment, and so that doesn't show up until you actually deploy your changes to the live environment. So, which is actually kind of a nice feature.
Okay, okay, cool. And
Yeah.
now let's say one of the next things I want to see is I want to look at the data that we created. So I'm going to go to data,
Yep. You're going to go to data, and then you're going to go
app
app data.
data,
Yep.
and here's where we're seeing the data, right? So this is like interacting with your actual data. It says
Mm-hmm.
when it was created, and you mentioned this. Oh, that's an interesting, unique ID.
Yeah, that's automatically generated.
I'm trying to see. Oh, that's okay. So it's just like a GUID, right? It's 32 characters. It just looked a little bit different from a typical UUID to me, but that's
Okay.
probably what it is. Uh, it says it says created date.
So the created by, you're not logged in as a user, so that's why that's going to be empty.
That's empty. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to click. So it says I can actually make any changes here. I click save,
Yep.
and then I go back here. Hang on. Did I? Okay, I changed 3.8.
Yep.
Right. And then what am I? So if I want to delete, let's say I want to go ahead and.
I was going to show. We can actually create some like a UI element to actually delete it off the screen.
Okay,
as well.
perfect. Let's do that. Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
let's go back.
So what I would do is, let's go to icon on the left hand side.
Yeah.
No,
Here,
sorry.
my bad. Yep.
Let's
Okay.
drag that into. Well, no, drag it. Make sure you're dragging it into one of the problems. You made it so thin now. I don't know if it'll fit in there.
Okay, wait, hang on. Let me undo it. Let me.
Yeah, you were in the right place. Yeah, just make sure.
No, I'm trying to get to it to delete it. Oh, I guess there must be a deleted because
so the icon will show up in the in the tree on the left hand side, so you could delete it from there.
where would it show up? So I'm not able to delete it. Oh wait, hang on. I think I finally got to
Oh,
it.
you
Okay.
got it. But I was going to say, on the left hand side here are all the elements that you have on there, so
I see.
you could have found it there.
Okay, so got it. Where should I drop this? Where should I drop this?
It should be in the first, like the first cell. If you could get it inside the first cell, but
The
my
first cell
concern
of
is
the
the cell's too
of the
thin.
repeat of the repetitive grid at the bottom, right? Okay, I'm
Yeah,
dropping
you
it.
want it in the repeating group. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so you did it there. Let's do this. If you click on the repeating group itself, and then click on layout.
Okay, and then I just did some cosmetic stuff. Okay, and I click on layer.
Oh yeah. Okay, there you go. Went with the trash can. I usually like to use the X, but that's all right. That works. So if you click on the repeating group itself, right?
Oh, sorry.
You're on the icon. You're actually in the icon properties.
Oh, so I close this, right? I close
Close
this.
that, and then click on that. So what you can do is, right now it's showing as a column container. You want to change that to a row container. There you go.
What is the difference?
So a column is going to stack it vertically. A row is going to stack
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, visual.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, and you could do the alignment changes and things like that.
Okay, perfect. I think and then we need to add a workflow for this button, right?
Yeah, so on the icon, so now you want to click on the icon, and then you're going to go back to the appearance tab on the left. Yep, there you go, and then add workflow from there. And now you want to click on that, And then under data things, you could just search for delete. You could search for delete. That's another way to do it. So delete. So delete thing, and then click on that, and then you're gonna say current cells to do. Yep.
That's it, right?
And that's it. Yep.
Okay, now we go back here and refresh the
You have to refresh it.
perfect, right? So what we've done here is added, where are we at? So we are 40 minutes in, just so you know, let me actually stop and just share just that one page. Actually, you know what? That's okay. The thing is, it does this infinite thing, and sometimes I can't.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I think just to recap, right? We have 40 minutes, give or take, in, and this is somebody who's not used shirts. I'm working with somebody who knows this system, but still, that gives an idea, right? If you had to, the comparison we're trying to draw is if you had to write code to generate this. Now we did to-dos, but you may have templates. As companies, we have a lot of samples that we can stand things up quick enough. But in general, we were able to add like a heading to a to-do, an action. We added a workflow, and we got acquainted with many different things on the Bubble platform, right? So we have a few, at least about 20 minutes or shy of that to go. What I want to ask here is, so we saw the data, and we were able to go here and go deal with the app data and modify it, and I can go in and I can click edit. I'm able to edit the data obviously, but I cannot edit the metadata. That makes sense, kind of. What if I want to modify the metadata here?
The
Because I
created
noticed
date,
that this,
the
this
created
is a
date. I
read
don't.
on.
The unique ID and the created date. I don't think you're able to.
Okay, so this, in other words, we should treat this as though it's metadata for the system itself. If
Correct.
we wanted to be able to modify
You would
these
add
things, right?
another.
In other
Yeah,
words,
you
if
would want to
they're
add
not
another.
immutable,
Yeah.
then we'll have to add a new field called created date, another field called modified date, so we are able to act upon those items,
Correct.
right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, what else there is? Okay, this in other words, this experience is essentially us dealing with it. And I noticed that you can upload data, so we can have like a spreadsheet or a comma separated list or whatnot to upload. It says CSV. Does it also support a JSON upload?
JSON upload. I suppose you could do that. I don't know if you could do it through the data tab, but you 100% could do it through the API connector.
Through the API connector. Okay,
Yeah,
got
yeah.
it.
You
Yep.
could potentially do it that way.
Okay, and then what is it? It says switch to a live database. Oh, that's when it's actually streaming, basically, right?
Say that one more time.
The live
Oh, the
database
live
is
database.
probably when,
So,
yeah, it's going to
so
start
that
stream.
would be the live and the production environment. So if you publish this to the production environment, then you could actually see the production database. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. Is that what it is? I thought it was the other way. Let me try this, right? So now we have, if I want to make this, we make this
Well, you
smaller.
haven't published it to live, and you probably can't publish it to live without a paid plan. But if you did have a paid plan, you could publish it to the live environment, and then you could switch back and forth between the two databases.
Okay, okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what else? So we dealt with the data. What we haven't dealt with in this one here, just to quickly touch upon it, is plugins, right? So if I go to plugins here,
Yeah, so you can add plugins, and there's
what is like, I mean, I know we saw the API connector yesterday. Maybe I can add that one. And these are these third party
yes.
plugins published
Well,
on
Bubble
Bubble?
Bubble has their own, but the majority of them are third party plugins. Correct. Yeah.
And then the quality of these plugins, like, do is it more like when you go pick up an open source piece of software repository, you do your due diligence to figure out whether it's been supported, what the quality of that is? Is it you have to do those kinds of things here as well,
Yeah,
correct? Before
there's
you,
definitely a wide range of quality. Some are really good, and some are not so good. So
okay. So in other
yeah,
words,
so
then
there's
there's
definitely
a
ones that
Bubble.
we tried out that are there's some that I use all the time that are fantastic, and then there's some.
Okay, so in other words, Bubble has a development platform where Bubble developers would sort of contribute to the
Correct.
plugins, right? And then you make these plugins available. I mean, that's a topic that I'm curious about too. Maybe it's for another day, but just understanding, like for instance, like Sam, do you create, like, as part of what you guys do? Do you also create plugins to make them available here?
We have one on the well, I don't have many, but we do have one that's available on the store. Yep.
Ah, okay, perfect, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a bunch of plugins, and let's say if I wanted to deselect a bunch, and I just wanted, let me see. in PDF, chat. I say calendar. I guess there isn't one for calendar. Let me pick the chart. I guess there are. I don't know if
Maybe
they empty because I don't.
check all the ones above under the types. Check all those. Check yeah. There you go.
Okay. That's the categorization. Okay, so they have the Google Calendar plugin you can install. So what this means is now you install the Google Calendar plugin and then you go to the plugin page to check out the plugin, the ratings, and yada yada yada, and then you feel like, okay, this is kind of what I want to do. Now we have the plugin available. We don't need to do it like in this session, but where do I see the plugins here? How do I go to design to sort of, would I see the plugin somewhere here?
It depends on the type of plugin, right? So they would either show up in the Elements tab if that's the type of plugin, or sometimes you'll see it in the Workflow tab, right? Like so, sometimes it's
Now,
kind
for
of like
let's say for the calendar plugin that we just added, let's pretend that I want to add a button here that says book a meeting with me, right? Where would I go find? Should I be finding it? Let's say.
I'm not familiar with that plugin, so I'd have to look at the description. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Oh, okay, no worries. So let's also look at a couple of other tabs here. So we saw the
So
plugins
the one
tab.
I wanted to share with you is the Style tab because that goes back to the question that you asked about. Is
This
that
one here, right?
design system? Yeah. So you can create different styles of buttons. You can create different styles of all the elements that you can reuse, so you don't have to style each one individually. Does that make sense?
I see what you mean. So if I want to create like, where would I? Let's say I want to create a new button. How would I do
So
that?
under buttons, right above that.
Okay. Okay. Or even if I want to modify. So if I modify this button, so it's got a different color. Now, every time I go add a flat button, that's how it's going to look. Or if I create new buttons for my design
That's correct.
system. So this is essentially the design system for what it is that you're building, correct?
That's correct. Yep,
And
100%.
now let's say, and I know I'm going to, this is awesome. We have like a few more minutes. So I'm going to ask a bunch of random questions actually, which is, let's say now you're working with multiple clients or you're working on multiple applications and you have two different design systems per se, right? One is for Snowpal, one is for Drive Face. Do you have a way to categorize the design system here so you know that this button or these buttons are for Snowpal applications and those buttons are for Drive Face applications?
So I'm going to tell you that the design system is specific to the app. So when you change it in the app, it's only going to change the design defaults for that.
Oh, it's not at the org level, so to
That's
speak, but
correct.
it's at the app level, right?
That's correct. Yeah,
Essentially.
that's correct. Yeah.
And which means if I want to have the same, let's say I worked on this design system and I did, put in my time in creating this design system. And if I wanted to reuse it, is there a way to sort of export this design system and import this design system into this other app that I'm now going to be working on?
There might be a way, but one way that I know would work is you could clone that app, and at least those elements would.
Clone the app and just delete the
Yeah,
app
and if you
itself
wanted to
and
delete
keep.
everything else, you could delete that, but the design styles would remain. So that's one that there might be another way to do it, but off the top of my head, I know that would work 100%.
Okay, perfect. So I think we've touched. I know it's close to an hour, coming close to where we should. We want to wrap up here. Is there anything else that we could possibly cover in the next 8 minutes, Sam?
Off the top of my head, it's it'd be it's if you want to add other elements. I mean, are there other
Or
kind
what
of
you can do is, what I will do is I'll just show what I was curious about this, because this is specifically, relevant to us as a company. So if someone's using, let's say, a Bubble
yeah.
to create this, and they want to, sort of connect to an API, and I'll probably just show this quickly, right? So our APIs are on AWS, right? There are multiple places, but let's say you go to the marketplace, you can look at the APIs and see which ones are the idea behind us publishing. I kind of didn't mention this, San, is us trying to expose our basic elements as APIs so other people can build their systems much quicker and not have to worry about the back end, right? And just by way of real, like a 30-second background so you get context to it. This is the first app that we launched, right? Our essentially web interface. And when we build this is a project management platform that does n number of things. But for us to get to showcasing our specific features that we want to showcase, I'm just going to open one of those projects, if you will. Let's say Tesla, Nvidia, and Meta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I want to showcase this and I want to maybe showcase a Kanban, for instance. We
Okay.
needed a number of features available in the backend before was possible. Being able to add checklists, being able to create access control and whatnot, right? So even as an engineering team that moves fast, we recognize that it took us more time than we would like for it to take because the APIs were pretty wide and robust and we needed a lot of functionality. And then as we talk to other founders, we recognize that a lot of people would be able to build things quicker if only they didn't have to reinvent the wheel on the back end systems, right? So that's what gave us an idea to re-provision our APIs and sort of make them public. And we made them available on this marketplace here, right? So if you go to, like, for instance, to, oops, not to, go to developers.snowpal.com. I mean, we have our APIs published on Postman and whatnot, but you could go to the API reference for one of the APIs and then look through a number of endpoints. We have like hundreds, thousands of endpoints that we publish, right? So
Okay.
for people who are using that, this is basically you persisting data, you consuming functionality on the back end. And now I'm thinking, when you mentioned that yesterday, what I thought about was, you know what? Somebody who's using Bubble would go in here, would actually say, you know what, I want to connect to the Snowpal API. They would use an authentication mechanism that we actually support, right? Through
Yep.
an API key, for instance. Yeah, private key in the header,
Well,
right? They
and
would pick
you
this
could
key.
100% publish, because there are paid plugins. You could actually create a pre-built plugin to one of your APIs on the Bubble
You know
marketplace.
what? You read my mind there.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
a
just, I
thousand
was
percent.
just
Yeah.
between the, with this API connector, we can certainly consume our APIs, but with the plugin, if we publish the plugin directly to, say, our access control, right? See, one of our APIs is access control, which means if you're building any system that has to deal with the access, roles, privileges, permissioning, members, and teams and whatnot, no matter how complex or how simple you wanted that access control to be sent, you could consume this API, for instance, right? But
Okay.
like you mentioned, rather than have somebody go to a connector and pick a Snowpal access control API, there could be a readily available connector here that says access control API connector. So somebody who deals with access control doesn't even care to know that Snowpal that's supporting it. They can just consume that API connector, right? But the question I have for you in that regard is, how do you monitor? I mean, I guess if you're purchasing an API through subscription or usage or whatnot, that needs to happen outside the bubble system, right? You're going to
No,
do that outside the bubble
it happens
system.
within the Bubble system. So you
It would
build
have,
a plugin within Bubble, you set the price. Bubble obviously takes a cut, but they actually pay through Bubble, and then you.
in that case, or if you did the API connector here, in this case, you buy it separately on AWS and then use the key, and then you're just paying by use, right?
That's correct.
So Bubble, you're saying Bubble also supports a way to sort of monetize the APIs within their system.
Well, yeah. So what you would do is you would build a plugin. The plugin theoretically would make it a much easier for someone to connect to your API. You've done
I
a lot of
got
the
it.
legwork, and then all someone has to do is put in the API key, so they don't have to figure out how to configure it on the back end. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense, right? So
Yeah.
in
So
other words,
that's what we did. We created one with the when Facebook launched their conversions API. We actually created a plugin where someone could just put in their conversions API key, and then we created some pre-built actions where someone could um, send a conversion event to the Facebook pixel that someone put into the plugin. So yeah, 100% you could do that.
okay, perfect. Which means, let's say we have a list of these APIs, we could have a plugin theoretically for conversations, for project management, for content management, right? For all of these. And so people can consume it right away off the bat on the Bubble platform, for
That's
instance.
correct.
Okay, that's
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 correct.
cool to know. I think just to do a quick recap, right? So let me go back here. So what we did was we were able to create a very basic app that was able to add a to-do. We had a heading, we had a text box, a repetitive element, had a button to adding it. We were able to delete each of those items as well. We made some minor tweaks to, the fonts and the color and the background, and we're able to look at the data, modify the data through, the actual data editor, or the data client, inbuilt data client on the platform here. We looked at a couple of plugins. We talked about the API plugin and how you can implement plugins, expose them on the platform for other, sort of Bubble users to consume. Anything else that we could, like, summarize here, Sam?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, I think you got just you scraped the surface of it, but it definitely. Hopefully, you got kind of a little bit of feel for what it could do. But again, I mean, we're just barely scraping the surface of.
Yep. Should we just call it wraps here? Left to you.
That's fine because I think it would be tough to kind of get into something else at this point without going much deeper, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay. Do you have 5 minutes? I just want to summarize the non-technical part of.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so this is good for folks, anybody who's wanting to sort of get a feel for Bubble. This is where you could sort of end the podcast and move on. The next part is not so much teaching Bubble. It's just me sharing my first thoughts, right? As a developer, as somebody who's not used it on this. So I'm going to go here, but only if that's of interest to you, Sam. Otherwise, I don't want to hold you back. Is that
Yeah,
conversation
I
of
got
yeah?
5 minutes. That's fine. Yeah, I'd be interested. I would be interested to hear what you have. Yeah.
Okay, so I am sharing my screen again here, right? Okay. So the thing is, what is nice is, for sure, without writing a single line of code. Now that I think, I want to see the snippets and how to add code here, but we could probably do it in a subsequent session. We didn't write any code. Like, I behave like not a developer, right? It's like I'm just understanding the platform, dragging and dropping, making some adjustments. It's all design time work, pretty much, right? That's what I did. We collectively did, but I'm just saying I, because as just sort of playing the role of a non-developer here. That's what we did.
Yeah.
So, which is good because I'm able to create something as somebody who's not really a developer. But that's what these no code and low code platforms bring to the table, right? Today, what we did was we represented Bubble as pretty much a no code platform because we didn't get into the low code support that it has, like you mentioned yesterday. So we're trying to sort of skim the surface of what it can do. We were able to create this to do app, able to add some to do items and delete it, and sort of do a preview. We didn't deploy it, which I might even get a 1 month subscription just to sort of get the feel for it. If you get that, then you can deploy it, have the live database, and then go from there. But even without doing that, Sam mentioned that you can share this URL of the preview with with your coworkers and maybe your clients and investors and whatnot, so they sort of get an idea for what it actually looks like. Okay, so that's sort of the high level, right? Which is good. Now, just varying the, I'm going to say the good and the not so good, just from my opinion, and please feel free to interrupt me, San, and disagree as well. So one of the things is, any platform, you need to get acclimatized with the platform, right? You need to kind of understand. It's almost like going to a different country or a different town. Different country is a good example. Sort of driving, driving, that's, you've done it all your life, but driving in France is going to be different from driving in the US, for instance, right? So you need to get acquainted with the rules, the road, the directions, and whatnot. So that, I think that's necessary, that's a given. That said, as I continue with this sum, and again, Chan, when you get to the 2 minutes where I have to wrap up, please let me know. I can immediately close this. Yeah. So you mentioned yesterday, it was very interesting. We said, hey, there is a Bubble way of doing things, and you got to sort of learn. So in what we did today, as somebody who's been using the platform, what, I know it's a very small sample size because we did very a small tiny thing today. Was something there Bubble like to you more than it being standard no code like, or was everything we did today more no code like and nothing Bubble specific?
I think and I have a different perspective because I, quote unquote, grew up on Bubble, right? So that's the first platform I learned, right? But like the thing that most people have trouble with in Bubble, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts coming from a developer background, is just the nomenclature and the structure around the data setup. Does that make sense? Like calling it a thing, and then it gets very complicated because the way they do the relationship is a little bit different as well. If you get into, one of the things when you set up the data type, there was a checkbox that said, "Is this a list of things?" Right? That's where people get really kind of turned around on themselves. Is
No, I know what
understanding.
you mean, right? Here's my thought. Here are
Yeah.
my thoughts on that. See, every system is going to have to come up. I'll take a parallel example, right? Let's take these hyperscalers like AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure, because I feel like it's not a bad example. There are three different massive vendors, right? I don't know what the exact market share is. I know AWS is probably at the top there, 30 some percent, followed closely, not too far off, by Azure, and maybe it's Google
Google
Cloud
Cloud.
next or
Yeah.
something along those lines. Now, at Snowpal, we use AWS primarily because we've just been using that for years. and we occasionally use Google Cloud and Azure. Now, I take that example because many of the things that they do many similar things. They do some things that are unique as well. But if you want to go look at an AWS catalog, right, San, and figure out which database I should use, almost good luck to you, right? Because they have like 15 different options for any problem that you want to solve. Some that they've built, some that they've acquired, a combination over the years. Now, if you compare and contrast with other providers, now you have a big pool of things to do. You're like, you know what? I just want to stick some data somewhere. Can you tell me what the best place is? And it's not easy sometimes, right?
Mhm.
Now, the reason I mentioned that as an example is the three big providers, from what I know, they try to do things so people don't have to relearn every ecosystem. Not entirely so. They fall short of it, quite short of it, I think. And I think it's intentional as well. It's probably some of it is intentional, some of it is unintentional. Now, if things are very portable, right, you might actually switch loyalties. It's not easy. It's easier said than done.
Yeah.
They want you to lock you into a platform.
Yeah.
Now, if you brought that to my long winded answer, if Bubble did everything in a pretty standardized manner, how are you going to be married to this? There is not going to be a vendor lock in which they want for you to have. That's point number one. Point number two is I don't think there is a specification. I could be wrong. I don't know if there's an industry specification for no code platforms, right? You tell me if there is one, because if there isn't one, how are they going to standardize something, right? They're going to come up with something that makes sense. Like create a thing was a great example that you took. I'm pretty sure when they were building this, the developer is like, yeah, I'm going to create a thing. And maybe someone decided that's not bad language. Let's just roll and go with that language, right?
Yeah.
And that becomes a language. And now, if you become an Apple of no code platform 10 years down the road, create a thing is going to be the way to call that. Everybody's going to call that create a thing. Otherwise, you have this constant, what? No, I have to learn new nomenclature, right? But to me, that's not the biggest problem. You have to learn the ways of that land, no matter which system you go to. So
Sure.
I think the quicker you can, the better off you are. But you mentioned something about the learning curve yesterday, right? Like in your experience, also, tell me, I think you said that the Bubble has a steeper learning curve than some other platforms, correct?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of an inverse relationship. I think the more you can customize, the steeper the learning curve, generally speaking, right? And the plus of Bubble is that you have fewer limitations than maybe some other no code, low code platforms, right? But the downside is it just takes longer to learn it, right? So I think things like Glide and Adalo are a little bit more structured, which means you can't customize as much, which means you don't
Okay.
have to learn as much, but also means you can't customize as much, right? So I think
Okay.
that's really, I think that's where Bubble kind of has a reputation of having a steeper learning curve than some other no code platform.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then the couple of other things I want to add to this list, right? So now the first thing is learning the platform, correct? So you're not going to, again, I'm not going to recommend that people, for this is true for of any system, not just Bubble. You could spend a day, a week, several weeks, or a month learning this before you build something, right? But that's not the way to go, right? Like you do like something like what we did today. You learn nothing about the platform. You have your requirements in mind. You try to build to your requirements, and then you organically learn that elements, the layers, the plugins, the forms, and reusable elements, and everything that you just mentioned, or as you go, as opposed to spending time. At least that's the way I feel like you could approach it. I don't know, what do you think? How do you recommend people approach this?
Personally, would say pick a simple problem you want to solve and go build and go build build something so that it's meaningful to you. I just find that that's a you're more motivated to learn as opposed to picking something random that has no value to you. So I
Oh, no, no, sorry. My question was that, no, didn't mean to interrupt you, but what I want to maybe, let me rephrase. What I was trying to say there is, if people to say, I'm going to spend a chunk of time learning the platform before I start using it, I typically don't recommend that approach. I'm like, I don't know the system, but let me start adding and dropping elements and play with it and learn as I go. Or would you recommend that for something like Bubble, you actually allocate a day or a few days or a week, sort of get to know the system before you start building anything?
a little bit different. When I took my bubble boot camp, I think I told you the story about my daughter and the food truck app. I wanted to learn things in the context of building that app. Does that make sense? And so I kind of
Right?
did it in parallel. And so there was some experimentation involved in that, but I learned it in the context of, okay, what do I need to know to build this app? And so that helped me. To me, there's a purpose behind what I'm doing, in a direction. And I just felt like that kept me motivated, kept me engaged. So
Okay.
I personally would just jump right in and try and build. If I fail the first couple times, I don't care. But at least I have a purpose and a direction for my learning. Does that make sense? And so,
No, no, exactly. That's sort of what I would
yeah,
recommend as
I
well,
kind of was
right?
starting to think that we were saying the same things, probably just in different ways. Yeah.
No, no, exactly, right? And then the things that sometimes it gets takes getting used to, you may like or not, is one of the things I already complained about, which is when I go to the element, but this pain comes in the way, right? And
Yeah.
so these are minor things, but this is what becomes tricky for systems to change because these are fundamental aspects of how they do. Like in your experience of using Bubble, like how frequently have you seen their interface and functionality? Are we talking like things stay pretty much the same for several months? Or do they, every time you're logging in, like you're seeing that change all the time?
They're not changing all the time. Now, one thing, I'll just give you some context. Bubble was bootstrapped for the first few years. I think they're 9 years old, and I think they raised their first round. I think they raised like $100 million maybe 2 or 3 years ago. You are starting to see them. So, for instance, their workflow interface, that was really hasn't changed that much for the first 6 years. They're making changes now, so it's still in beta. So I think I have access to it. I think I think you have to opt into it, but they're changing that UI UX a little bit as well. If you look at the early versions of Bubble versus now, it's pretty similar. I mean, there's small changes, but I think they are going to start making some change. Honestly, because they're getting a lot of competition. I
No,
think for a
exactly. No,
while,
the reason I was mentioning that is I can, I'm just wearing the developer's hat. Let's say if I were a developer in their company or an architect, right? I'm just trying to see how some of this, and I've done this a while as well. All my life I've just been building products either for different people or for the last many years for ourselves. And so I'm just trying to wear this hat, and maybe we can have a different conversation, at some point, whenever you want to, please hit me up to talk about what it means to improve Bubble, sort of playing the role of an internal developer and speaking to what it means, right? Because I can imagine a number of challenges they could potentially have. Money is one thing. Sure, you do need it, but I'm just thinking about what they have to address. But the other thing that kind of where you have to get used to is, see, when you get to this pane and the number of things that are on a pane, the reason I asked you whether this can be done outside of this, not just through a native app, but through like a JSON design interface, if you will. I'm just using the words loosely. Like I want to be able to do this, but perhaps not through the interface at all. I have a JSON that's pre-built. I want to say, if I want to go through this input, I have this and I can have my scripts to modify it and whatnot. I want to be able to apply that directly to this. I don't want to actually have any UI interaction with the pane, but that sort of goes against the tide,
I was going to
maybe,
say,
right?
you doing that is, at the end of the day, you're not really the target market, and so the target market is, 95% of that market. Number one, it doesn't understand what you just said. Number two is not going to want to do that. So
Good
yeah,
point.
so that's interesting. But yeah, I'm sorry. Finish your thought though.
No, no, no. I think it's a great point. Right? Which is exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, you know what? So now I was just, that's a segue to the last part of what I was thinking there is, okay, there is a clearly different target market here, right? Now, what I want to say here is, I mean, nothing to do with Bubble per se, right? But let me ask you one more thing before I switch gears there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whatever we did here, right? Whatever we did here, one thing I forgot to ask completely, and unintentionally actually, is what is their AI integration looking like? Do they have AI integration at this point, or is that something that's coming from what you know?
When you say AI integration, I want to make sure we're on the same page on what you mean by that.
Yeah, yeah. Here is what I mean, right? Everything that I just did here, here is how I would like to be able to do this. I want to go to a chat prompt that says, create a to-do app with a label and a button, and I click add. It needs to add. I want to delete this, and I say this in 4 lines, and I want to have generated this in like 3 seconds as opposed to like 20 minutes.
So if you go to the index tab on the top, there's a drop down right there, and then where it says build page, yeah. So you there are I think there's eight total, maybe I think eight total different things.
I,
Now, what
I
I would say
see.
with this is it builds the layout and the design elements. it doesn't fully build out the workflows behind it.
Okay.
So
But that's good. I was exactly so because this is my prediction, right? Not that you asked for it and just
yeah,
volunteer, right? Is to me, this is where the next set of challenges are going to be, right? Because Bubble or any no-code platform prior to this simple beta link here is a different problem that they are solving. But Bubble or any other no code, low code platform in the context of AI, we talked about it briefly yesterday, right? It's going to have to be dramatically different. I think this warrants a separate conversation all entirely so, right? So I don't want to sort of pollute this because I think that is a topic that I would love to talk to you about. I would love to talk about the design of what it means to be an internal developer, sort of speculating what their experience is going to be in building and improving this platform and things of that nature, for instance. And last but not least, the target market is also very interesting, right? I can speak to it as somebody who has been in the business of building software for years. Maybe not me, right? Maybe not me, but that's not to say that it's not me. Maybe not in production, possibly, right? My first thing to consume something like this would be, what, I have an idea in mind, right? And maybe I don't want to write any lines of code at all because I don't, I'm not worried about the framework, the library. I just want to visualize this. And what would I've done typically drawing it on, typically the way we do it is we take an iPad, draw something quick and dirty, and then try to create a quick and dirty representation of it. This is something that's cool for that, right? Why do I have to do anything like that? The only question, the caveat there is there are other platforms. I forget the name of one of them. I looked at recently that was built off of a native sort of. It's what they call a native AI app, right? Not an app that has AI support. Like when Bubble has AI, it is more like an existing app that adds AI support to it, right? It doesn't make it a native AI app,
understand.
but
Yep.
there are native AI solutions right now that are built ground up with that problem in mind, right? Either they're built directly on NVIDIA and the GPUs or something else, for instance.
Yeah.
What does it mean to using those platforms? And what does it mean for me to commit to my learning to a platform, such as something new that we have to get acquainted to, right? This is where the next set of challenges are possibly going. I'm just throwing out a bunch of things. I don't know if does some of it make sense?
No, it does make sense. It does make sense. I think the good news, though, is learning an AI enabled app can only, you would think, would only reduce the learning curve, right? So I think that's one thing that is in its favor. But to your point, it's almost like the I don't know if this is the best. This is the example I give in mind. You tell me if this makes sense to you, but like how iPhones changed how we interact with our phones, right? This idea of swiping and gestures and things like that. Like they built that with that in mind versus these other phones kind of had to kind of incorporate that. And I think what you're saying is something that's built with this in mind as opposed to trying to integrate that tech into it has a little bit of an advantage, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? That there's a little bit
Yeah,
of a
fundamentally, right? And again, San, anytime you want to call this raps, because I can continue talking. This is a very exciting topic and you're a great person to chat with. So anytime you're like, you know what, I want to go, I want, if you know what I mean, just tell
yeah.
me,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
yeah.
wrap up and
Let's do like 5 more minutes, and then I'm good.
okay, perfect, right? Because I think there's a lot more to talk about. I'm going to sort of continue doing this after this podcast because I want, sometimes it's fresh in my mind. I'm going to, but anytime you want to hit me up to
Yeah,
chat
yeah,
more,
absolutely.
please don't even hesitate to hit me up. Because I think this is a point of inflection for many different things, right? From an AI standpoint, we talked about some of it yesterday, and I think the no-code platforms are going to be subject to the same type of challenges. Because as I'm looking at it more, as I'm talking to you and thinking about it, I think the way we're going to build software is going to fundamentally change. Now, if you took the pre-AI world, like maybe a couple of years ago, before things became extremely popular and whatnot, right? It's become mainstream now. I think that no-code platforms brought immense amount of value to the table because if you're not a coder or if you're a coder, you don't code for this particular project or whatnot. They were like, hey, I'm going to give you a very rich set of tools for you to consume and use so you can actually be productive. And that was great. It makes a lot of sense, right? It made sense for me to invest time and energy learning that system. Now, if you take AI into the picture, bring AI into the picture, this has to be done very, very differently. I think completely differently, right? So I want to start with a conversation element. I want to say, generate something, create something for me and I want to be able to add code snippets where I can and override the code snippets. But the design elements and the richness of the user interface that these bring to the picture table, I'm just trying to think if fast forward 2 years, 5 years, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
there room for low code, no code platforms to coexist as the native AI platforms make coding much easier? Or is one going to win the other? I'm just thinking out aloud. We have like a couple of more
Yeah.
minutes. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think we touched a little bit on this yesterday. This is, I think we're both guessing, right? We both don't know because as we talked about yesterday, it's the puck is just moving too quickly. Where I stand today with what we know today, which is probably obsolete 5 minutes ago, right? But I still believe if you come from a coding background, then I think an AI coded solution is going to work best for you, right? Because you're living that language. I think if you come from a non-technical background, I still think there's a benefit to an AI enabled no code tool, right? Because again, you still have to deploy it, you still have to maintain it, you still have to iterate on it, right? And so if you don't know code, you're at a disadvantage if your output is code, right? I think personally that a non-technical person using an AI enabled no code tool can probably do more. I think you could build the tool in either, but I think it's what happens after you built that tool initially where I think that's where a no code tool gives you some advantages because of the maintenance and then because of the kind of iteration of making changes to that end product. I think in no code is going to be easier for a non-technical person is what I think, but I could be wrong. I think that could change very quickly as AI kind of code, improves at an exponential rate, right? Is kind of where I'm at right now. Does that make sense?
I think it's a fair point, and it's a good place to sort of and call it wraps here. As always, I'm going to ask. I'm not going to ask the same non-technical question that I asked about food yesterday. Today, it's going to be different. It's going to be, what is your favorite travel destination?
Oh, oh.
A place you've been. It can be a place you've been to, or the place you've not been to as
Okay,
well.
so I'm gonna pick a place that I've always wanted to go to on my list that I have not been to yet, which is Japan. I've not been to Japan, and I'd actually like to go to Japan. There's a culture seems very rich to me, and I definitely would be interested in visiting there.
Lovely. Any questions for me before we end?
What is your favorite place, both either non-traveled or where you'd like to be?
Every dollar we try to save, sure, the company takes all the money. So nowadays, every time I think about traveling, it's paying all of these different, making Zuckerberg richer, is Bezos richer, is what ends up happening when you run a company. But when we do have that money to actually travel and not spend on the companies, and Europe is our number one, number two, number three, and number four travel
Oh, wow. Okay.
destinations. Originally from India, so I've seen a fair bit of Southeast Asia to some
Mhm.
extent. I'd love to go to South America, but my favorite is anytime there's an opportunity to go anywhere in Europe,
Wow.
I've just grabbed that opportunity. Especially, I love cricket. And anytime we end up in England, we're just sitting there watching cricket, and I don't
Nice.
ask for anything more.
I loved London, so I did visit London. That was one of my favorite places to visit. I will say that.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's love. And then
It's
if you're,
expensive.
yeah, very much. And if I tell people, if you want to eat good Indian food, and if you don't want to go all the way to India, you have like two other options really. One is Singapore. Singapore has
Okay.
phenomenal Indian food.
Okay.
And the next, I think the closest I can think of is UK, right?
Okay.
London and any other parts of England, United Kingdom. America is unfortunately not one of the places to eat the best Indian food.
We do corrupt pretty much anything we get our hands on in America.
But this is great. So again, folks, this is San Hong. Thanks, San, for entertaining me for day two in a row. Educating us about Bubble, no-code platforms, and everything. So again, folks, this is the second podcast. We're gonna get them published in the coming weeks in the
Awesome.
new year. Definitely check it out. And San Hong is the founder of Drive Face Consulting. We'll include the links to San's company and profile and any other links that you want for us to include. So thanks
Thanks
a
for
lot,
having me.
San.
Thanks again. Always a pleasure. And happy holidays to you. Happy New Year to you and your family and all your listeners.
Yep, happy holidays and happy new year to you as well. Talk to you soon. Until next time. Bye bye.
See you.